My name is Arya Sterling, and at 34, my life is built on foundations, both the literal ones of the properties I manage and the figurative ones of the principles I hold dear. My company, Sterling Heritage Properties, isn't just a business, it's a philosophy. I find old, forgotten buildings in our beautiful city of Portland, structures with good bones and sleeping stories, and I help them breathe again. It's a quiet, steady passion that has afforded me a life of peaceful independence, a life I cherish from my sun-drenched loft in the Pearl District, with its views of the Willamette River and the steel arches of the Fremont Bridge. 3 years ago, the very foundation of my own life crumbled. My parents, a botanist and a geologist who had taught my brother and me to read the world in soil and stone, were killed in a landslide while hiking near Mount St. Helens. The news didn't just break our hearts, it reconfigured the landscape of our existence. In the quiet, hollow days that followed, the will was read. As the executor, and the one with a practical mind for property, I inherited the family home, a lovingly preserved craftsman in the Laurelhurst neighborhood, along with a small duplex they'd bought as a nest egg. My younger brother, Leo, received their portfolio of investments and savings, a considerable sum meant to secure his future. The arrangement was logical, a decision made in the clear, cold light of grief. I knew how to manage a deed, and Leo, an artist to his core, had no desire to become a landlord. What we failed to account for was the topography of grief itself, how it can create its own landslides within a person. Leo, always the more sensitive soul, was caught in the slide. His work as a freelance architectural illustrator, once a source of pride and purpose, faltered. Deadlines were missed, his vibrant sketches losing their life, their lines growing unsteady. His long-term girlfriend, unable to find her footing on the shifting ground of his sorrow, eventually walked away. Watching him drift was like watching a ship slip its moorings in a fog so dense you can't see the shore. When he finally confessed over coffee at a small cafe on Division Street, his voice barely a whisper, that he could no longer afford his studio apartment, my heart ached with a fierce, protective love. The solution felt as natural as breathing. Our childhood home, the house on Hazelfern Place, sat waiting, steeped in memories and silence. "Leo, move into the house," I said, my voice gentle but firm. Rain traced paths down the cafe window, blurring the world outside. "Take all the time you need. No rent, no pressure. Just be there. Heal." For the first time in months, a flicker of light returned to his eyes, a brief clearing in the fog. "Are you sure, Arya?" "I'm sure," I promised, my hand covering his on the table. "It's what Mom and Dad would want. It's still your home." For nearly 2 years, that home became his harbor. The arrangement was a quiet rhythm of healing. He started jogging along the river, the steady pace of his feet on the pavement a metronome for his mending heart. He began to sketch again, filling pages with the intricate details of Portland's historic bridges and buildings. We resurrected our family's tradition of Sunday dinners, the scent of Mom's rosemary chicken once again filling the warm kitchen, a weekly ritual that anchored us to our shared past. He was finding his way back, and my heart, which had been holding its breath, began to exhale. And then he met Isabel. He met her at a bereavement group his therapist had encouraged him to join. Her story was a tragedy that mirrored his own. She lost her husband 2 years prior in a hiking accident on Mount Hood. Leo, with his open, empathetic heart, was drawn to her immediately. She was elegant, poised, with a fragile beauty that seemed to call out for protection. Looking back, I can see the first subtle signs of discord, the way she seemed to absorb all the light in his life, leaving little room for anyone else. But at the time, all I saw was my brother smiling a real, unburdened smile, and for that, I was profoundly grateful. Their relationship moved with the speed of a wildfire. 3 months after they met, Leo called me, his voice brimming with a breathless joy I hadn't heard since before the landslide. "We're getting married, Arya." I sat on the edge of my sofa, the city lights twinkling below my window, a sudden silence filling my apartment. "Married?" "Leo, that's wonderful. But it's so fast." "When you know, you just know," he'd replied, his voice full of the unshakable certainty that only the newly in love possess. The wedding was a quiet affair at the Multnomah County Courthouse, with only a handful of us as witnesses. I tried to push my reservations aside to wrap my brother in the unconditional support he deserved. Isabel was luminous in a simple cream-colored dress, her blonde hair swept into an elegant knot. But during the small reception at a quiet Italian restaurant downtown, a thread of unease began to weave itself through my happiness for him. I watched how she would gently but firmly steer him away whenever I tried to have a moment alone with him, her hand a constant, proprietary presence on his arm. "She's just nervous," Leo explained later when I mentioned it. "She wants you to like her." But there were other things, small as hairline fractures, that I couldn't ignore. The way she subtly corrected his grammar in front of our parents' old friends, a soft smile on her face that didn't quite mask the sting of the rebuke. The dismissive wave of her hand when he suggested a honeymoon camping trip to the Oregon coast, a place of so many happy childhood memories for us. "Oh, darling, let's do something a bit more civilized, shall we?" she'd murmured, and I saw the color rise in Leo's cheeks. I felt her cool, appraising gaze on my tailored blazer and trousers. "Aria, don't you ever just feel like being a woman?" she'd asked, her laugh light and airy, as if it were a harmless joke. I held my tongue, burying the discomfort under a layer of hope. Leo had walked through fire. If Isabel was the cool water that soothed his burns, then I would learn to love her for his sake. I gave them a substantial check, a gift to help them start their new life, which Isabel tucked into her clutch with a swift, practiced motion before Leo had even finished thanking me. As we hugged goodbye on the sidewalk, the streetlights casting a warm glow, Leo said, "We should have you over for dinner soon." At the house. It was only on the drive back to my loft, the rhythm of the windshield wipers keeping time with my thoughts, that I registered the subtle shift in his words. "The house. Not your house." A small change in tide, but one that signaled a sea change to come. 2 weeks later, I drove across the river to Laurelhurst for our first Sunday dinner as a newly expanded family. I brought a bottle of Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley and a delicate, white-flecked hellebore for the garden, one of Mom's favorites. The moment I stepped through the front door, a sense of dislocation washed over me. The warm, buttery yellow of the entryway walls had been replaced with a stark, gallery white. Our mother's beloved teak console table, where a bowl of keys and mail always sat, was gone, replaced by a minimalist chrome and glass creation. And the photos, the gallery wall that chronicled our lives from gap-toothed school pictures to awkward teenage ski trips, had vanished completely. "We've been doing a bit of updating," Leo said, his smile a little too bright as he took the wine from my hands. "Isabel has an incredible eye." Isabel emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron that looked far too pristine to have seen any actual cooking. "Aria, you're just in time." Her smile was a perfect, polished curve that didn't touch the cool blue of her eyes. "Leo, darling, take her coat." As he hung my jacket in the hall closet, I saw more changes. The comfortable, slightly worn sectional sofa, the scene of countless family movie nights, had been replaced by a low-profile leather couch that looked like it belonged in a design magazine, beautiful to look at, but utterly uninviting. The built-in shelves my father had so proudly constructed were nearly bare, his treasured collection of vintage geological maps gone. "The house feels different," I said, choosing my words carefully. "It was so cluttered, so heavy," Isabel replied, gesturing around the room. "All that dark wood and those old-fashioned things. We're simply letting it breathe, bringing it into the modern era." I swallowed the words that rose in my throat, words about how those old-fashioned things were the very soul of the house, imbued with the spirit of the people who had loved it. Instead, I asked, what happened to Dad's map collection? I was hoping to frame one for my office. A flicker of something unease, perhaps, passed between Leo and Isabel. "Oh, we donated a lot of that old paper to a university archive," Isabel said with an airy wave of her hand. "It's better for them to be preserved properly, don't you think? You can't build a future when you're buried in the past." The entire evening felt like a performance. I watched Leo, my articulate, thoughtful brother, seem to edit his own words, his gaze constantly flickering to Isabel's face for approval. When I started to tell a story about a disastrous camping trip from our childhood, I saw Isabel's smile tighten, and Leo quickly changed the subject. So, Aria, Isabel said, as she served a deconstructed lemon tart that was more art than dessert, it must be so quiet for you, all alone in that big loft. Don't you ever wish for a family of your own? I'm very happy with my life, I said, my voice even. My work is fulfilling, and I have a wonderful community of friends. But you're 34 now, she pressed, a soft, pitying note in her voice. Time isn't exactly on your side for that sort of thing. I just worry about you ending up alone. Leo shifted uncomfortably in his chair but remained silent. My happiness isn't contingent on a partner or children, I replied, my smile polite but firm. But thank you for your concern. Later, as we cleared the plates, Isabel chattered on about their plans for a full kitchen remodel. We're thinking of soapstone countertops and custom cabinetry, she said. Now that the house is paid off, we can really invest in making it ours. I nearly dropped the stack of plates in my hands. Paid off? Leo's parents left him the house free and clear, she continued, oblivious to my sudden stillness. It was such a gift to start our marriage completely debt-free. I looked at Leo, who was now intently scrubbing a pot at the sink, his back to me. He had not only allowed her to believe he owned the house, he had seemingly embellished the story. When Isabel went to the living room to put on some music, I cornered him by the dishwasher. She thinks you own this house, Leo, I whispered, my voice tight with a mixture of hurt and disbelief. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked trapped, his face a mask of misery. Please, Aria, just don't say anything. Not yet. Why? I pressed, my voice still a whisper. Why would you let her believe that? He finally looked at me, his eyes pleading. You don't understand. When we met, I was nothing. I had no job, no confidence. I was living in my sister's house. She saw me as someone strong, someone with a foundation. It felt good. For the first time in so long, it felt good. But relationships are supposed to be built on truth, Leo. I'll tell her, he promised, his voice cracking. I swear I will. Just not right now. We're still finding our footing. Please, Aria. For me. Against every instinct, I agreed. I told myself it was for him, a temporary measure to protect his fragile, newly rebuilt sense of self. I told myself that the legal papers in my safe deposit box were the reality, and this was just a story he needed to tell himself for a little while. I didn't realize then that some stories, once told, take on a life of their own, growing roots so deep they can shatter the very foundations they were built upon. In the months that followed, the house on Hazelfern Place began to feel less like a home and more like foreign territory. My visits, once a source of comfort, became fraught with a quiet, humming tension. Isabel's comments about my popping in grew more frequent, each one a subtle barb wrapped in a silken ribbon of politeness. Oh, Aria, it's just that as newlyweds, we do value our privacy, she'd say, even if I had called an hour before. She'd suggested, with a light laugh, that perhaps it was time for them to change the locks, just for a sense of a fresh start. Each time, Leo would offer a silent, apologetic shrug, his eyes skittering away from mine. With each visit, another piece of our family's history seemed to vanish. Grandfather's naval compass, which had always sat on the fireplace mantel, was replaced by a sterile white sculpture. My mother's hand-thrown pottery, each piece uniquely hers, disappeared from the windowsills, replaced by minimalist glass vases holding single, perfect calla lilies. When I asked, the answers were always vague and dismissive. We're embracing a more minimalist aesthetic, Isabel would say. All that clutter was just so suffocating. The Sunday dinners, our last remaining tether, began to fray. They were postponed, then rescheduled, then forgotten. Twice I drove the 30 minutes from my loft, a warm dish in my passenger seat, only to find the house dark, my texts and calls unanswered. The sting of rejection was sharp, but it was overshadowed by a deeper, more profound sorrow. I was watching my brother, my only constant in a life of movement, recede from view, becoming a stranger in the house where we had become a family. He was a man I no longer recognized, one who seemed to walk in the shadow of his wife, afraid of his own voice, his own history. I was losing him, and the ground beneath my feet, which I had always thought so solid, felt terrifyingly unstable. The slow erosion of my connection to Leo and our family home culminated one crisp autumn afternoon about 3 months into his marriage. I needed to retrieve some important financial documents related to the duplex, papers I had stored in the filing cabinet in my father's old study. It was a Tuesday, and I'd sent Leo a text that morning, but it had gone unanswered. I let myself in with my key, the silence of the house pressing in on me. "Leo? Isabel?" "It's just me, Aria," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the still air. I walked down the hall, my footsteps echoing on the newly polished hardwood floors. The walls, once a warm tapestry of our lives, were now hung with large, abstract canvases in shades of gray and black. They were technically beautiful, but held no story, no warmth. The door to our parents' old bedroom, which I'd assumed Leo and Isabel were using, was closed. A small, professionally printed sign in a sleek silver frame hung on it, "The Primary Suite." In the study, I went directly to the tall oak filing cabinet. As I thumbed through the folders, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. The files were all there, but they'd been reorganized. The folder I was looking for was missing, as was the one clearly labeled Hazelfern Property, Deed and Title. I began a more thorough search, a cold dread seeping into my veins. Files related to our family's history, Dad's geological surveys, Mom's botanical notes, all gone. My gaze fell upon Dad's roll-top desk, a magnificent piece of cherry wood he'd inherited from his own father. Its surface, once a chaotic but beloved landscape of papers, pens, and rock samples, was now draped with a gray linen cloth, serving as a stand for a massive, sleek television. The casual disrespect sent a pang through my heart. On an impulse, I lifted the cloth and rolled back the top. I reached for the small, hidden compartment where Dad had always kept things of special value, my grandfather's Purple Heart, my mother's first love letter to him. It was empty. As I turned to leave, my heart heavy with a sense of violation, a light from Isabel's laptop, left open on the corner of the desk, caught my eye. The screen displayed a listing on a high-end online consignment shop, Rose City Resale. The photo was unmistakable. My mother's collection of hand-painted Portuguese tiles, a gift from our parents' trip to Lisbon for their 25th anniversary. The description read, "Vintage hand-painted ceramic tiles, perfect for a backsplash or decorative accent. For $150. A wave of nausea washed over me. I quickly took out my phone, my hands trembling as I snapped a photo of the screen. I navigated to the seller's main page. There they were, laid out like evidence in a crime scene, Dad's collection of antique Baedeker travel guides, listed for $600. Grandfather's naval compass, described as a handsome nautical antique, for $350. Dozens of our family's keepsakes, our tangible memories, being sold off to strangers, one by one. Just then, I heard the front door open, and Isabel's lilting voice call out, "Leo, honey, I'm home." I quickly shut the laptop and walked out to the hallway, my mind a whirlwind of anger and sorrow. Isabel's smile vanished the moment she saw me. "Aria, I wasn't expecting you." "I texted Leo," I said, my voice strained. "I needed some papers for the duplex." I held up a random folder I'd grabbed, a flimsy prop in this sudden, terrible drama. "He didn't mention it," she said, her tone implying I was lying. Leo appeared behind her, his face a canvas of discomfort. "How did you get in?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "I used my key," I said, my gaze fixed on my brother. "Your key," she repeated, her voice flat. "Leo, I thought we agreed." Leo looked at the floor. "I was going to talk to her, Izzy." "It is simply not appropriate for you to have a key to our home, Aria," Isabel said, stepping forward, her voice taking on the tone of a patient adult explaining a simple rule to a difficult child. "We are a married couple. We need our privacy." "I understand the need for privacy," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "But this house has been in our family for 20 years. I've always had a key." "Well, things are different now," she said with a brittle smile. "I'm sure you'd understand if you had a family of your own." The jab, usually a pinprick, now felt like a blade. I ignored it and turned to Leo, my last hope. Leo, can we please talk? Alone? About the things that are being sold online. His face went pale. What things? The Portuguese tiles. Dad's travel guides. Grandfather's compass. I watched the blood drain from his face as I listed them. I saw the listings, Leo. Isabel stepped between us, a protective lioness. Those things were just collecting dust in the attic. We are creating a home here, Aria, not a museum. It's about looking forward, not back. Those things, I said, my voice trembling with a grief that was suddenly fresh and raw, are not just things. They are our history. They have memories attached to them. Leo inherited the contents of the house, Isabel declared, her chin high. It is his property to do with as he sees fit. I stared at my brother, my heart breaking. Is that what you believe, Leo? That you inherited everything? He couldn't look at me. Isabel, maybe this isn't the time. There is nothing to discuss, she snapped. Your sister needs to learn to respect our marriage, our home, and our property. The sheer, staggering irony of her words, of her standing in my house and lecturing me about her property, was suffocating. But one look at the shattered expression on my brother's face stopped the truth from spilling out. I couldn't do it. I couldn't detonate his life, not like this. Leo, I said softly, my voice pleading. Some of those pieces, they are all I have left of them. For a fleeting second, I saw the brother I knew, his eyes filled with a familiar sorrow. Then Isabel's hand rested on his arm, and a shudder came down. We have to make our own memories now, Aria, he said, his voice weak, hollowed out. You can take a few things if they're that important to you. A tiny spark of relief flickered within me. Thank you, I said, my voice thick. It's not much. Just Mom's jewelry box from the dresser and the old photo albums from the linen closet. No, Isabel said, her voice sharp and final. Absolutely not. The jewelry is a family heirloom for our future children. And the albums. It's unhealthy to dwell on the past like that. Something inside me, stretched taut for months, finally snapped. Leo, is this what you want? I asked, my voice rising. To erase them? To erase us? Stop trying to manipulate him. Isabel hissed, her polished facade cracking to reveal something ugly beneath. Just because you're alone and miserable doesn't mean you get to poison his happiness. And then Leo spoke, his words the final, devastating blow. Maybe you should just go, Aria, he said, his eyes fixed on a point over my shoulder. We'll talk some other time. I walked out of my own home with nothing but the useless folder in my hand, a hollow ache where my heart used to be. The locks were changed 2 days later. My calls to Leo went to voicemail. The brother I had known was gone, and a stranger was living in his place. A month later, a text from an anonymous number directed me to a storage locker in an industrial part of town. Inside, I found a few dusty boxes of my mother's old gardening tools and some chipped kitchenware. The things that held our stories, the jewelry box, the photo albums, the maps that charted our father's life, were gone. I was being systematically excised from my own family history, and I felt utterly, terrifyingly alone. For weeks, I was adrift in a sea of indecision. My lawyer, a compassionate but no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, had been clear. The house is legally and unequivocally yours, Aria. You can have them removed at any time. But the thought of serving my own brother with an eviction notice, of potentially shattering our relationship beyond repair, was unthinkable. So I waited, clinging to a fragile hope that Leo would find his way back. The tipping point came when I saw photos on a mutual friend's social media page. It was a fall garden party at the house on Hazelfern Place. There, in our mother's cherished garden, were dozens of smiling strangers. Leo and Isabel stood in the center, arms linked, playing the gracious hosts. I hadn't been invited to a party in my own home. The anger that had been simmering for months finally boiled over, but it was a cold, quiet anger, a resolution. I wouldn't create a scene at their party. Instead, I would reclaim a piece of our life, a piece of what was right. The following Sunday, our traditional dinner day, I baked my mother's rosemary chicken, the familiar scent filling my loft with ghosts of happier times. I placed the warm dish in a basket and drove to Laurelhurst. When I rang the bell, I could hear the faint sound of a piano playing inside. After a long wait, the door opened a crack. Isabel peered out, her face hardening into a mask of polite hostility. Arya, this is not a good time. I offered a small, steady smile. I won't be long. I just brought dinner. For Sunday. We're busy, she said, her body blocking the doorway. Please, Isabel. I just want to see my brother. She let out an exaggerated sigh. Stay right there. The door clicked shut. Minutes later, it opened again, and Leo stood on the threshold, looking like a man caught between two warring countries. He didn't quite meet my eyes. Hey, Arya. This really isn't a great day for a visit. It's Sunday, Leo, I said simply, holding up the basket. I brought Mom's chicken. He glanced over his shoulder into the house, then stepped onto the porch, pulling the door partially closed behind him. Look, Isabel and we have some things we need to do. Can we do this another time? Another time like the last dozen times you've canceled or ignored my calls? The question was quiet, devoid of accusation, but heavy with the weight of the preceding months. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of distress I knew so well. It's been complicated. I'm sure, I said softly. The garden party looked lovely. His face flushed with color. Arya, The door was wrenched open from the inside. Isabel stood there, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing. This is precisely the kind of boundary stomping I am talking about, Leo, she said, her voice sharp as broken glass. We tell her we are busy, and she shows up anyway, with her guilt trips and her chicken. I'm not trying to guilt anyone, I said, my voice remaining calm. I am trying to see my only living family member. Oh, spare me the drama, she sneered. You've had your brother under your thumb your whole life. You can't stand that he has a new family now. A real family. Me. You're just a sad, lonely woman trying to leech off his happiness. Leo flinched as if struck. Isabel, don't. No, it's time someone told her the truth. She turned her fury on me. You need to get a life of your own and get the hell out of ours. This is our house. Get out. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a snap of anger, but a profound and sudden quiet. The months of hurt, of confusion, of walking on eggshells, all coalesced into a single point of clarity. I looked at her, standing on the porch of the home my parents had built, a home filled with the echoes of their love and laughter, and I felt a deep, abiding sorrow for her, for my brother, for what had been lost. The absurdity of it all was so immense, so tragic, that a small, humorless laugh escaped my lips. The sound seemed to enrage her further. You think this is funny? I will call the police. I will have you arrested for trespassing. Please do, I said, my voice suddenly clear and steady as a bell. I would welcome it. Leo looked at me, his eyes wide with panic. Arya, please. Don't do this. I'm not doing anything, Leo, I said, my gaze holding his. I have been silent. I have respected your choices, even when they hurt me. I have watched our family's history be sold off and given away. I have been locked out of my own home. But I will not be ordered off my own porch. Isabel's eyes narrowed to slits. Your home? This house belongs to Leo. Your parents left it to him. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my purse and pulled out a slim file folder. No, Isabel. They didn't. I opened it. Our parents left Leo their financial assets. They left the house and the duplex to me. The deed, the title, the property taxes I've been paying for the last 3 years, it's all in my name. The color drained from her face. She snatched the papers from my hand, her eyes scanning the legal documents. Her expression shifted from disbelief to a white-hot fury. She whirled on Leo. You lied to me. You told me you own this house. I was going to tell you, he stammered, shrinking away from her. You let me invest my time, my energy, my future in a house that belongs to her? Her voice rose to a shriek. You let me believe we were building a life on a foundation that was a complete and utter lie? She stormed into the house, grabbing her phone from the hall table. I'm calling the authorities. This is fraud. You conspired against me. Go right ahead, I said, following her into the entryway, a place I suddenly saw with painful clarity. I placed my folder on the cold glass table. When the 2 Portland police officers arrived 20 minutes later, the house was thick with a toxic silence. Isabel launched into a frantic, tearful tirade about my harassment, my lies, my attempts to steal their home. I waited patiently, and when she finally paused for breath, I calmly explained the situation and handed Officer Miller, the older of the two, my documentation. He and his partner reviewed the papers, their expressions neutral. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said, finally turning to Isabel. "These documents are all in order. The property at this address is legally owned by Ms. Aria Sterling." Isabel looked as though the floor had dropped out from under her. "That's impossible," he told me. All eyes turned to Leo, who stood by the staircase, looking small and broken. "Sir," Officer Miller said, his voice gentle but firm. "Did you misrepresent the ownership of this home to your wife?" Leo's response was a barely audible, "I let her believe something that wasn't true." Isabel exploded. "You pathetic, spineless coward," she screamed, all traces of the poised, elegant woman gone. "You let me pour my heart into this place. You let me tell my friends, my family, you made a fool of me." She grabbed a minimalist vase from a pedestal and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. "Ma'am, calm down," the younger officer said, stepping toward her. "Don't you tell me to calm down. I am the victim here." She turned on Leo, jabbing a finger at his chest. "Living off your sister like some kind of parasite." She grabbed a framed wedding photo and threw it to the ground. The glass splintered across the hardwood floor. "That's enough," Officer Miller said, his voice now steel. "Legally, this is not your home, and you are destroying private property. You can either leave peacefully or we will arrest you." The reality of the situation finally seemed to land. Her rage collapsed, leaving a terrifying emptiness in its wake. She stared at Leo, at me, at the officers. "Fine," she spat. She grabbed her purse. "Are you coming with me, Leo? Or are you staying here with your keeper?" He looked between us, his face a battleground of conflict and shame. I should go with you. We need to talk." As she stalked out the door, she turned for a final, venomous parting shot. "Enjoy your big, empty house, Aria. I hope you and your money are very happy together." The door slammed behind them, rattling the windows in their frames. Officer Miller looked at me with kind, weary eyes. "Would you like to press charges for the damages, Miss Sterling?" I shook my head, a wave of exhaustion so profound it was a physical weight. "No," I said softly. "They're just things." After they left, I sank onto the cold leather sofa, a piece of furniture that felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The silence that filled the house wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a battlefield after the fighting has stopped. Surrounded by the wreckage of my family, in the heart of my own home, I finally let myself weep. That night, the house on Hazelfern Place felt vast and hollow, each room an echo chamber of memory and loss. I walked through the spaces Isabel had remade, her sterile, minimalist vision a stark testament to her attempt to erase the past. In the kitchen, I ran my hands over the cold, stainless steel countertops that had replaced the warm, scarred butcher block where my mother had rolled out countless pie crusts. In my father's study, I stared at the blank walls where his maps had once hung, charts of distant lands and deep oceans that had mirrored the boundless territories of his mind. It was as if a ghost had been scrubbed clean. Around midnight, a single text message illuminated my phone screen. It was from Leo. At a motel. "I'm so sorry, Aria. I need to think." I didn't know how to respond. What could I say? The chasm between us felt too wide to be bridged by a few lines of text. The hurt was a deep, quiet ache. Instead of driving back to my loft, I went to my old childhood bedroom. Isabel had transformed it into a pristine guest room, with a bed that looked as though it had never been slept in. I pulled back the crisp, impersonal duvet, lay down and stared into the darkness, feeling like a stranger in the geography of my own life. The next morning, I was woken by the soft click of a key in the front door. I tensed, my heart pounding, but it was Leo who appeared in the bedroom doorway, looking haggard and lost. "You stayed here," he said. It wasn't a question. It seemed easier, I replied, sitting up. "Where is she?" "At a hotel downtown." He leaned against the doorframe, a hesitant guest. "She says I betrayed her. I didn't offer the comfort he was likely seeking." "Didn't you?" The question was soft, but it landed with a quiet thud in the space between us. He winced. Yes. And no. It's complicated. He slid down the doorframe to sit on the floor, his head in his hands. I never wanted any of this to happen. What did you think would happen, Leo? I asked, my voice gentle. Did you think the truth would just stay hidden forever? When I met her, he began, his voice muffled. I was at the lowest point of my life. I felt like a complete failure. She saw, or I let her see, a man who was stable, successful. The man who owned this beautiful house. For the first time since Mom and Dad died, I didn't feel like a broken charity case. I felt like someone worthy of respect. So you built a relationship on a lie. It started as an omission, he whispered. And then it just grew. Every day, the lie got bigger, and I got smaller. I stood and walked to the window, looking out at the massive Douglas fir that had stood sentinel over our entire childhood. And the heirlooms, Leo? Mom's pottery, Dad's maps? Was selling our history part of the story, too. Shame washed over his face. That was her. She called it curating our environment. She said we couldn't build our future if we were clinging to the past. I tried to argue, to save things, but she's so persuasive. She can make you believe that up is down. She didn't seem very persuasive yesterday, I said quietly. That's the other side of it, he said, his voice defensive. You don't see the way she can be. She can be so caring, so supportive. After the accident, she was the only one who seemed to understand the depth of the darkness. I turned from the window. Did she, Leo? Or did she find someone at their most vulnerable and build a fortress around them, cutting off every escape route, every connection to the outside world? He was silent for a long time. What are you trying to say? I'm saying that in the past year, you've become a ghost. You've let go of your friends, of your work, of our family traditions. You let me be locked out of my own home. You let our parents' legacy be sold to strangers. Does that sound like a healthy, supportive love to you? She has her own trauma, he protested weakly. Her husband. The one who died on Mount Hood? I interrupted. Leo, have you ever met a single friend of hers? A single family member? Have you ever seen a photograph of this man? His silence was the only answer I needed. I went and sat on the floor across from him. Leo, I said, my voice softening, when was the last time you felt like yourself? Truly, peacefully yourself, not performing or walking on eggshells. He stared at his hands, turning them over as if they belonged to someone else. I don't know, he finally admitted. Then his voice broke and the grief he'd been holding back for so long came pouring out. I miss them, Arya. I miss them so much. Every single day. It's like a part of me is just gone. I know, I whispered, my own tears starting to fall. Me too. You were always so strong, he said, his voice thick. Handling everything, the estate, your business. You held it all together while I was falling apart. I wasn't strong, Leo. I was just busy, I confessed. I threw myself into work so I wouldn't have to feel the emptiness. I cried in the car on the way to meetings. I had to learn how to be the strong one because I was so used to you and me holding each other up. I reached across the space between us and took his hand. That's what we do. We hold each other up. And I let you down, he sobbed, his shoulders shaking. God, Arya, I am so sorry. We sat there on the floor of our childhood room, the morning light spilling across the floor, and for the first time in a year, it felt like my brother was home. His phone, which he'd placed on the nightstand, began to buzz incessantly with texts from Isabel, a rapid-fire volley of rage, then pleading, then accusation. He finally picked it up and silenced it. She tracks my phone, he said, his voice flat. She calls it staying connected. A few months ago, I met my old mentor from the design firm for coffee. She showed up at the cafe, accusing me of having an affair. He hasn't returned my calls since. He looked at me, a new, dawning horror in his eyes. She told me all my old work friends were a bad influence. She went through my phone while I was sleeping and deleted their numbers. The pieces were finally clicking into place, forming a picture that was both clearer and more terrifying than I had imagined. Leo, I said carefully, I think you need to consider the possibility that this isn't just a difficult relationship. I think this might be emotional abuse. He started to protest, a reflexive defense, then stopped. He just nodded, the fight draining out of him. I've thought it, he admitted quietly. But then she'll do something so kind, or she'll cry about her husband, and I tell myself I'm the crazy one. That's the cycle, I explained gently. The storm, and then the calm. It's designed to keep you off balance. We spent the rest of the day talking, truly talking, for the first time in years. As the story of his life with Isabel unfolded, a clear and chilling pattern of isolation, control, and manipulation emerged. That evening, I made a simple pasta, and we ate on the back porch, watching the sun set behind the tall firs. For the first time in a long time, I saw glimpses of the old Leo, his quick wit, his passion for architectural history, the way his face lit up when he talked about a new idea. The next morning, he made a decision. He sat at the kitchen table and, with a steady hand, wrote Isabel a short, clear email. He told her he needed space and that he would be staying at the house. He suggested they both seek counseling, separately. Her reply was almost instantaneous. A single, chilling line, "You have no idea what you've just done." My lawyer, Ms. Albright, helped us file for a temporary restraining order that afternoon, citing the threat and the previous destruction of property. 3 days later, a neighbor called me, her voice panicked. She'd seen someone trying to pry open a back window of the house. We raced over to find the kitchen window broken. Inside, the destruction was methodical and cruel. The word liar was spray-painted in black across the living room wall. In the master bedroom, the mattress had been slashed with a knife. And on the mantelpiece, the few family photos I had managed to salvage from a box in the garage were displayed, each one defaced, my own face violently scratched out. The police investigation revealed the truth about Isabel with a brutal efficiency. There was no dead husband. In fact, she had 2 ex-husbands in 2 different states, both of whom had restraining orders against her for similar patterns of harassment and property damage. The fortress she had built around my brother had been constructed of lies from the very first stone. In the months that followed, as the legal process unfolded and Leo began the slow, painful work of untangling his life from hers, the house on Hazelfern Place became our sanctuary. We decided to reclaim it together. We scraped the black paint off the living room wall and repainted it the warm, buttery yellow it had once been. We filled the empty shelves with books and small, meaningful objects. We printed new copies of the old family photos and hung them back on the wall, a testament to a history that could be damaged but never erased. We found many of the heirlooms in a storage unit Isabel had rented under a false name. Unpacking them felt like a sacred act. As I held my mother's pottery in my hands, its familiar weight a comfort, I realized that we weren't just reclaiming things, we were reclaiming ourselves. My own therapy had taught me a valuable lesson. I had always seen myself as the rescuer, the strong one. But I came to understand that true support isn't about solving someone's problems for them. It's about providing a safe space for them to find their own strength. I stopped trying to fix Leo and started simply being with him, a quiet presence as he navigated his own path to healing. He started working again, his illustrations regaining their confidence and life. He reconnected with his old friends, who welcomed him back with open arms and no judgment. He was rebuilding his life, not on a foundation of lies, but on the solid ground of his own talent and resilience. One cool spring evening, about a year after that terrible Sunday, we were sitting on the back porch. The garden, which Leo had been tending with a gentle dedication that reminded me so much of our mother, was beginning to bloom. "I've been thinking," he said, breaking a comfortable silence, "about the house. It's yours legally, Arya, but it feels like it belongs to both of us. To our family. Maybe we should put it in a trust, make it officially ours together." I looked at my brother, his face calm and clear in the twilight, and my heart filled with a love so immense it felt like it could light up the darkening sky. "I think," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "that's a wonderful idea." A few months later, Leo signed a lease on his own apartment in the Alphabet District, a sunny one-bedroom in a beautiful old brick building he'd always admired. The day I helped him move in, I saw that the first thing he'd unpacked was a collection of framed photos, which he arranged carefully on a bookshelf. In the center was a new one, a picture of the 2 of us, taken on the porch of the house on Hazelfern Place, laughing into the camera, our faces turned toward the sun. We were no longer just surviving, we were healing. We were growing. We were home.